According to the research by the National Library of Medicine, video game exposure in adolescents 8 to 18 years old is estimated to be about 15 hours a week, and recent content analysis of these games shows that 89% of these games contain some violent content. The sheer amounts of these games played every week obliges us to take notice of the potential harms of these games, and the impacts are too dire to be ignored. Today we will be discussing issues with violent content, possible solutions, and how you can help benefit yourself and your community with respect to violent video games. The research in this speech has been taken out of Harvard Health Newsletter, the National Library of Medicine from the NIH, the New York Times, and the Oxford Scholarship University Press. Let's start with the root cause. What are the main issues with violent video games? And in these studies that I'm about to mention, violent is defined as including guns, abusive language, and violence between human characters. Violent video games affect empathy-related behaviors, and users become desensitized and don't feel for others as much before exposure or with no exposure. And a longitudinal study of girls between 9 to 12 grade shows greater rates of aggression over the four-year period. And violent video games also affect interpersonal deficits related to social efficacy, pathological lying disinhibition, meaning the lack of planning or seeking immediate reward. Now that we have discussed the source of the mental issues and the psychological issues caused by these violent video games, what are some ways to combat these? The journal Adolescence article shows that 90% of kids said that parents never check the ratings before letting them buy or rent video games. Parents could regulate the video games that their child is playing, and this could greatly reduce the amount of violent content that the child is consuming every day. When the video games came out, as per the New York Times, there was much less violent content as there is now. So they mentioned that solutions lie in the personal responsibility and local legislators to regulate what games come in and out of the game industry to make the choices better for the kids to play on. Adding, the Oxford Press University shows that more awareness about video games and the harmful effects of these video games would be sufficient to help people know more about the effects, and that would let them put more effort into reducing the exposure of these games to the users. Moving on, what benefits will result from the solutions that we have discussed? By regulating the games, kids will have more normal moral, emotional, and mental development, and without the adverse effects of aggression and attitude issues predicted by increased violent game use. The legislation would result in better choices for kids, as we mentioned before, with them giving more content that's non-violent and giving them more options to still enjoy that feeling of video games, but without the violence. And without proper awareness, the unchecked effects of violent video games will scar future generations forever. Okay, so what can we do to help our community and help the people around us with respect to violent video games? We can start, if you are one of those users who is playing these violent video games, you can start by playing games with less violent content or with no violent content at all. Raise awareness by letting your friends and family know about the adverse effects. And if you are a parent, you can regulate the games that your child plays and check the ratings to check if those games are considered violent. A personal story, I do not usually play video games, but in terms of watching violent content, once I have decreased that use, I really see the effect that it has on my attitude. So let's conclude. Today we have discussed issues with violent video games, possible solutions, and results that would have been achieved from these solutions. And finally, one last stat from the Harvard Health Newsletter on violent video games. The Pew Research Center reported that 97% of youth ages 12 to 17 played some kind of video game, and that 2/3 played video games that contained violent content. This just reinforces the urgency with which we need to take action and decrease potential harms of violent content in video games. Did this info inspire you to take action on this topic? Well, I hope it did convince you to help benefit yourself and your community. Thank you so much for your time and help.